Earlier this month, a small Catholic parish in Massachusetts made national news. St. Susanna's had a long history of activism, ranging from peace protests against the Israeli war in Palestine to advocacy for nuclear disarmament. They are part of a refugee resettlement collaborative on their own with some mainline Protestant churches too. But none of that worthy work is why they got national attention this December. Instead, when they were decorating for Christmas, it was their Christmas decorations that got them so much attention. They put up most of the Nativity, just like normal, but the Holy Family, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, were missing from the middle of their display. In their place was a giant sign with big blue letters on it that said, "ICE was here." A smaller sign beneath it said, "The Holy Family was safe in the sanctuary of our church." And above the Nativity was a traditional banner saying, "Peace on earth." But it had an eerie single question mark at the end of the motto. Now, Father Spears-Newsome, who is the pastor there, said that the Nativity's focus on immigration came after conversations with several of the refugee families that St. Susanna's had worked with in their area for many years. The reactions to St. Susanna's were swift. The church's social media pages were filled with pro-ICE remarks, calling the congregation despicable and sacrilegious. The acting ICE director called Josema an activist reverend who had done something absolutely abhorrent. The Archbishop in Boston called the Nativity divisive political messaging and demanded that the church take it down. The parish refused. They wanted a face-to-face meeting with the Archbishop before taking any action, because for the congregation at St. Susanna's, the Nativity represented the Incarnation in 2025. It reflects the context that Jesus would be coming into if he were born today, Father Josema said. Others vehemently disagreed. C.J. Doyle, the executive director of the Catholic Action League of Massachusetts, a conservative political organization, said, "This is not right, it's divisive, it's disrespectful, it takes away from the essential Christmas message. The purpose of the Nativity is to remind us of the purpose of Christmas, not to remind us of current political news." I see that last bit stood out to you as the way that it stood out to me when I was reading the Christmas story this year, particularly that epilogue of the Nativity of Jesus' infancy that we read this morning. In Matthew's Gospel, we see the Holy Family flee persecution and danger in their home country and cross the border into Egypt. This was no sanctioned crossing, no permitted family trip. The Holy Family was actively fleeing the authorities who sought to harm them, and their safety was facilitated by a border crossing. Is it a one-to-one of the immigration enforcement stories we've been reading about for months now? No, it's separated by about 2,000 years, to be fair. But there are some striking similarities. At the center of the Christmas story is a family who flees government agents and makes an unsanctioned border crossing to stay safe. If, as Mr. Doyle says, the purpose of the nativity scene is to remind us of the purpose of Christmas, I'd say St. Susanna's nativity is doing a pretty good job, and his reaction might indicate that it's being successful. The St. Susanna nativity reminds me of two important realities of Christmas. First, that Jesus has kinship with the persecuted and victims of violence. Second, it reminds me that God does not promise to remove the source of our fear, but God does promise to be with us to face them. I've seen a lot of pro-ICE sentiment that has tried to paint the Holy Family as rule followers who never ran afoul of the law. And in doing that, I think critics are often trying to align themselves with the Holy Family, or to align the Holy Family's experience with their own. And we all face that temptation, I think, when we read the Bible, to make the Bible seem like it's talking directly about us, rather than an oppressed and marginalized minority subject to the whims of the imperial forces around them. For some of us, that does describe our lives, and I don't want to ignore that. But for many of us in this room, I think it's easier if Jesus and his family look and act more like we do. If Jesus were born like I was in a suburban hospital to a middle-class white family in the United States, that Jesus probably wouldn't make a whole lot of demands on my life. He'd be a blank slate on which I could write my own experience, rather than face the realities that the Christ child and the Holy Family did. The reality is this: the infancy of Jesus, the Son of God, was characterized by a whole lot of movement that was directly caused by the genocidal and violent mechanisms of government. The Holy Families were refugees. They were their time period's equivalent of undocumented migrants. And they faced similar threats of violence that many of our neighbors have faced from ICE this year and continue to face today. And Jesus has a lot in common with them and a lot to teach us from that kinship. Now, that second reality of Christmas that became apparent to me this week through this passage was, as Reverend Dr. Bu Young Lee puts it, the Christmas story does not promise us a world without Herods, but it does promise us Emmanuel, God with us, even when we're running. The Christmas story does not promise us a world without Herods, but it does promise us Emmanuel. We've talked a lot about fear this Advent and Christmas. And there's no fear more palpable to me right now in our country than the fear of ICE and Homeland Security agents. Our community, right here in Cary, was the target of ICE operations this year. People were abducted across the Triangle region, some of whom haven't been able to speak to lawyers since their confinement. U.S. citizens and non-citizens alike were taken by their operations. There was a U.S. citizen at the food line on Northeast Maynard Road, like 5 minutes from here, who was abducted from a construction site, taken in a car with ICE, his materials stolen from him, and when they realized he was a citizen, threw him out on the side of the road and left him there. A U.S. citizen. People were harassed and kidnapped based on the color of their skin. And arrests in North Carolina by ICE have nearly doubled since last year. One of the starkest memories I have of the days we spent tracking ICE during their operations in the Triangle was when we were sitting outside a Hispanic grocery store in Raleigh. Lauren and I were there with Dylan, one of our church members, and we saw a store employee standing by the door to the grocery store. So it was your typical grocery store door, one of the automatic ones, and it wasn't working the way that it normally did. Instead, when someone came up to shop, the employee would unlock the doors, let them in, and lock them again behind them. The same thing would happen as someone would leave. Lock and unlock, all day long. The parking lot, they told us, was normally packed during the week But that day, it looked like a ghost town. The grocery store was the only business that was open. All of the rest had shuttered out of fear. Fear was heavy in the air as ICE had just raided an apartment complex just minutes away. We had arrived on the scene just after they'd left and heard a teenage girl recounting how ICE had come out of the woods and abducted people in the apartment complex. All across the triangle, similar businesses and apartment complexes were barely operating or closing entirely. Restaurants and stores lost days of business because they couldn't open, or it wasn't worth opening because of the fear that ICE brought with them. But fear had another effect, too. God did not leave our community in fear. Reverend Dr. Lee says appropriately, fear can be holy. Fear can be holy when it draws us to protect others. Fear reveals what we love, what we value, what we are willing to risk. I saw a lot of fear in all of the faces of all kinds of people when ICE was here, but I also saw a whole lot of love. We wouldn't be afraid if we didn't stand to lose something that we deeply love. Those days spent following ICE around the triangle introduced me to a whole lot of people who deeply love their neighbors. Through official dispatch systems with Siembra, North Carolina, to informal, encrypted chats with community members involved in PTAs, neighborhood watches, and all sorts of civic groups, I saw the sprouts of resistance, watered by love and fear alike. In this workaday, resistance has made the authorities really angry. When police departments don't hand over their facilities to federal agents, neighborhoods surround ICE agents with honking cars, and federal agents are refused service at businesses, they respond out of a fear of their own, fear that they don't have as much power as they think they do, fear that they don't have the support that they thought they did, fear that this plan of theirs might not actually work or be a good idea at all. They hope to inspire fear in us. The goal was for us, all of us, to be afraid. But they didn't account for one thing. They didn't realize that fear can be fuel. Reverend Dr. Lee writes, "We may find that our fear is not something to push us away, but something to transform us. Fear is energy, and when grounded in love, it can lead to fierce compassion, courageous solidarity, and the fire of justice." They didn't count on our fear transforming us. They didn't count on God being with us in our fear and transforming how we respond. God has not removed the threat of ICE to our communities. Those same chats that I was in on those days in November, they're still going. They ping on my phone every day, as every day people in the triangle drive around looking, keeping watch for their neighbors. God has not removed the threat, but God has promised to be with us, to transform us, to move us to use our fear as fuel to resist tyranny and hate. This experience reminded me, along with our Holy Family, of a story from 1850. Because in 1850, a crisis confronted our country in a similar way that ICE confronts us now and that Herod confronted the Holy Family. The president was deploying federal agents to capture those who had escaped slavery and return them to their so-called owners in the South. Abolitionists had a choice to make. Should they surrender to the federal goon squads or take that fear and use it as fuel? Dedicated freedom fighters in Boston decided they wanted to make it fuel. When an escaped couple, William and Ellen Craft, came to Boston, they found refuge in a congregation of abolitionists and other fugitive slaves. The president sent in slave catchers backed by the federal government to retrieve William and Ellen. When the agents arrived, they said with all the confidence in the world, quote, "If we have to stay here for all eternity, if there are not men enough in Massachusetts to take them, we will bring some from the South." As it happened, they lasted 5 days and returned with no one. The Bostonians harangued the federal agents wherever they went, and they found no love for their mission in the city. The pastor of the Crafts Church, Theodore Parker, sent a message to President Fillmore, who had sent them. He wrote, "I would rather lie all my life in jail and starve there than refuse to protect one of these parishioners of mine. I must reverence the laws of God, come of that what will come. You cannot think that I am to stand by and see my own church carried off into slavery and do nothing." Fuel is what came from fear for the community in Boston. Fuel for justice, peace, and the love of their neighbors. One of the ways that modern freedom fighters have been fighting ICE is through something rather innocuous. They've taken whistles, the same kind you might find in a high school gym or around a referee's neck, and given them out to everyone willing to do something about ICE. The shrill sound of the whistle is now a recognized signal that La Migra, or ICE, is present in immigrant communities. It's a nonviolent way to keep each other safe and to make our neighborhoods more peaceful, secure, and safe for everyone. And I was thinking about this experience while I was writing this sermon, and Rick Chappell happened to come up to me after one of our Advent services, and he said, "Wes, I have a box of 200 whistles." And he asked if I could put them to good use. So I thought, what a wonderful illustration for us. So on the altar, we have a basket, courtesy of church member Rick Chappell, of whistles here. And what I want you to do is, before you leave today, come down to the altar and take a whistle or a few. There are lots of them. They're not even all in that basket. And I want you to take those whistles with you as a symbol. Whether you're in a situation to actually take it and go blow the whistle on ICE or not, I want you to take it with you as a symbol of fear not disappearing, but becoming fuel for you. Becoming fuel for justice, and not just justice, but for love of your neighbor. And just as the whistle transforms your breath into something loud and clear, may it transform your fear into an act of love. You don't have to be riding around following ICE vehicles to play a part in the resistance. Just carry your whistle with you wherever you go. Use it if you need to, but always keep it as a reminder of who we love and who we serve, and a reminder above all that love is greater than fear. Amen.